record. So hi everyone, thank you for registering for the BW Solar presentation on the proposed Leamington and Kingsville battery energy storage system. Today we've invited Alex Simakov from Sussex to discuss project status and what that would mean for ratepayer savings. Alex is an associate of energy and environment practice at Sussex's Toronto office, focused on supporting domestic and international clients and assessing, advancing, and safeguarding their interests in highly regulated sectors at the federal and provincial levels. So if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to send them in the chat and we will get to them during our question period following the webinar. So thanks, Alex, for being here with us today, and you can get started whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Sarah. I see we have quite a few folks from our team have joined. Still waiting for Tai, I believe, should be joining us, and a few others. We really appreciate your time. While we get the ball rolling, I'd like to introduce you to the BW Solar team, subsidiary of the BW Group. BW is led by some great folks on the call here who I'm going to introduce just as soon as we have Tai join. And we'd like to talk to you about their proposed 350 megawatt battery energy storage system to be located in the Kingsville, Leamington area. The project really on a high level has been designed to address really urgent and growing system needs in the region, propelled by the success of members from OGVG first and foremost. We're currently in the works with the ISO, the Independent Electric System Operator, to chart a pathway forward for the asset and to help bring it online really as soon as possible to make sure that your members and others who want to join the agricultural and other enterprises in Southwest Ontario have the energy availability and capacity to do so. So without further ado, I'd like to allow Tai to introduce himself, and we'll go through a team and say hi to everyone. Tai.
Sorry, everyone. Sorry for being late. I'm still having technical difficulties even after 2 years of video conferencing, but I'm getting there. Well, thank you everybody for joining the call. I really appreciate everybody's time. I think what we want to do is just to go through the project with you and also grab your input on this exciting project that we're working on. I think, first of all, maybe I can introduce myself, and maybe Mike and Greg can also introduce themselves. I think I'm the CEO of BW Solar. We started about 2 years ago, and we've been moving very quickly. My background is I've been in the industry for the last 16, 17 years. I've worked in government. I've actually worked at the IESO, PA. I've worked in finance, and most recently in development. So my background is in both government, engineering, and in finance. And really excited to be talking to you guys about this project. Maybe we should just put the presentation up, Alex, or? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Everyone can see this well? Is that visible for everyone?
Yep.
Excellent.
Got it. So I think today this is the agenda. We're going to go through effectively talking to you about BW Solar, who we are, who our parent group is. Going to give you a brief background on the Ontario system needs as well as the Leamington system needs. Then we want to go through our project and then give you a bit of information on just the status of the project, and then also to solicit some feedback from you at the end of the presentation. Mm-hmm. So I've introduced myself already. This is our senior management team right now at BW Solar. I think both Greg and Mike are on the call, so maybe you guys can introduce yourselves.
Yeah, thanks, Tai. And hi, everyone. Good to be here today. Mike Brugge. I've got about 11, 12 years now of experience in renewable sector. I'm an engineer by background. I graduated from University of Windsor. I started out as a consultant on the engineering and construction side of renewable projects, and have progressed now into I did a bit of time in operations and construction and moved into development where we are here at BW Solar. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the time. My name is Greg Scallen. I am the Chief Legal Officer with BW Solar. I've been in the industry a little more than 20 years, started on the traditional side, working at OGVG, working on hydroelectric mainly, but also some fossil fuel work. Then I joined a company called SunEdison, which I was at for about 10 years. They were a global renewable developer, 26 offices around the world. A lot of experience in construction, financing, and all areas of the development of projects, and very excited to be a part of this call today about this exciting project.
And as well, we have Meyer, Grant, and Jared as well, and my colleague Bonnie for support. Really, as we're going to go through this today, we really hope to encourage you to ask as many questions as you want. This project really is built for your members to make sure that they can thrive. Your feedback will be really important, both in the design and making sure that this project has the support it needs to move forward. And community consultation is very important for BW Solar, and that's why we're happy to make ourselves available really at your convenience.
So BW Solar, we've been around for about 2 years now. We are 100% subsidiary of the BW Group. So the BW Group is one of the largest oil and gas shipping companies in the world. And I think like a lot of other fossil fuel companies out there, or fossil fuel involved companies, we are all participating in moving forward into the energy transition. The group employs about 7,000 people. We have about 25 billion in assets, and that's split amongst 18 companies that the group has owned. Over the last 2 years, we've probably invested about 800 million in acquiring other clean energy companies. So out of the 18 companies that we own now, nearly half of them are in the clean energy space. In terms of BW Solar, we are based here in Waterloo with the majority of our employees in Canada. We do have some in the US as well. Our goal or our mandate is to develop both both solar and energy storage projects in North America. We are heavily involved here in Ontario, as well as in the US as well. We are purely greenfield developers, meaning that we will develop stuff from scratch. We're not acquiring assets from other people. And I think there's an advantage to that in terms of us knowing the ins and outs of projects, because with projects, there's always problems. And I think the more you know about the project, the more likely you are to be able to solve the problems. So I think for us, being purely greenfield developers, it gives us a little bit of a leg up in terms of other companies that may be acquiring assets. In terms of our development geography right now, mainly in Canada and the US, but definitely aspirations to be a global IPP. We have moved quite quickly over the last 2 years. Right now, we have an energy storage pipeline of over 500 megawatts of energy storage projects, and also currently developing 2 gigawatts of solar projects. I think for us, we are very keen on the Leamington area. We think that there are a lot of system needs there, which we could help to provide some solutions. So besides this project, we're also looking at multiple projects throughout Ontario, and a couple other ones in the Leamington area as well. So I think when we were looking at this project, we were looking at it from 2 perspectives. I think one from an Ontario-wide power system need, but 2, also the local need in the Leamington pocket. In terms of Ontario system need, when we were doing our analysis on this project, or doing our feasibility on this project, we came across 3 main reasons why this project would be very beneficial for Ontario. I think right now in Ontario, in terms of one, capacity, I think that right now we are already short capacity. If the current contracts on the current existing generation isn't recontracted, we're seeing drops in capacity already, a needed capacity, but definitely by mid 2020s, by 2024, 2025, there is a big capacity drop in this time frame. And this is largely due to the fact that Pickering is closing. And with that close, we do expect there to be a gap of 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts starting between 2024 to 2026. The second major reason is energy. So in terms of Ontario right now, we are very rich energy. So there is a lot of what we call surplus baseload generation, meaning generation that we create at nighttime, but we can't use. because the system doesn't need the power. So for all those non-technical people out there, the way the electricity system works is that you need to match your load with your generation. So historically, there hasn't been storage. So whenever the system needs power,
Sorry about that. He should be on momentarily, I hope. I think what Tai was hoping to address was that we have significant amounts of renewable intermittent generation coming primarily from wind and solar resources. There are times, such as, for example, when wind is blowing overnight, or high solar generation during weekdays with low industrial or residential demand, when we have surplus generation, and often we are forced to export this to neighboring jurisdictions like New York or Pennsylvania at below the cost of production or even at a loss. This is something that contributes greatly to our global adjustment, and this is significant amounts of clean power that we're unable to use here in the province for our industrial, agricultural, and so forth needs. A battery energy storage resource like the one that BW Solar is proposing would enable the technical opportunity to store that power from times of low demand, again, overnight or over weekends, save it and then discharge it during periods of high demand during the workday. This could primarily be used, for example, to displace the alternative, which would be natural gas fired generation. Of course, it's very carbon intensive and incur significant costs. BSS asset coming online here will relieve some of those issues and help bring down overall energy bills by making more efficient use of existing resources instead of having to build more additional capacity. Additionally, we'd like to point out the ancillary benefits of this. There are quite a number of services the ISO procures to make sure we have a managed and reliable system. This includes frequency regulation, black start, and so forth. This BSS asset will be able to provide really all of those in significant quantities and could have a significant contribution to maintaining reliability in the Southwest area and making sure you guys have the power quality you need to perform and grow your crops. I see Tai still on hold. For the capacity, as Ty's touched upon, we do have a significant drop coming on with the retirement of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station in 2024-2025. As well, the plan currently counts on a number of existing resources with expiring contracts to remain online to fulfill our capacity. If any of those resources fail to renew, for example, if they're unsuccessful in the capacity auction or the RFP, or they have technical issues that require them to be retired early, that further exacerbates the capacity shortfall. Again, these are all issues that the ISO is working on very carefully, and they have a plan in the works, but it's one that has a long runway of room, and we're hoping that the BSS could be a key part of that solution. As well, a lot of resources that the ISO is considering, particularly transmission lines, the Southwest, can take a very significant period of time to come online in the range of 8 to 10 years. A major advantage for the BSS is that we're able to bring it online within 2 to 3 years. These are going to be, a difference of 4 to 5 years that your sector will have reliable, high quality power to grow without having to wait for the transmission line to come online. We would also flag that transmission assets are incurring more political and regulatory risk than ever before. Folks may be familiar with the recent case out of Maine, where there was a referendum on allowing the Hydro-Quebec line to connect the hydroelectric resources of Quebec with the New England, Massachusetts grid. The referendum voted 60 to 40 against approving the transmission line because of concerns of the disruption to wildlife, other environmental concerns, and opposition from local producers. We're seeing these large-scale transmission resources being consistently constrained, so it's important, I think, to have a backup opportunity that's local and doesn't have to face the same kinds of permitting processes that a transmission line that's so visible and large and distant will incur. This would be very local. It would be effectively the size of a small factory with much less traffic, and would have fairly minimal environmental footprint. We have some maps and so forth in a few slides that we'll be able to paint a picture for your reference. The energy as well, as we've touched upon, significant shortfalls, as you can see in the graphs to the right. We do have a surplus in the near term, but we are going to have advocacy needs that's going to be emerging as resources come off contract, as they retire. So this is certainly a project that we're looking to contribute over the course of 20 plus years. And we believe that a battery storage resource is really the ideal to allow us to meet those energy and capacity needs without contributing to overgeneration, as intermittent resources are wont to do. And I believe we have Tai coming back on the line just as we touch on regional system needs.
Tai, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, guys. Just need to reboot the computer. So in terms of regional needs, I think that for us, this was the majority part of our analysis here. I think that as we all know, there are big constraints here within the region, but the province has been acting in terms of trying to alleviate some of these issues, and a lot of them have been transmission solutions. So thus far, right now, there are a couple of things going on. Right now, if you look at the picture on the right side, there is a line currently being contemplated from the Leamington TS to the Chatham TS. I think what the reasoning for this line is to bring, some of the power up in the northwest down to the southwest. In terms of this project probably, it's scheduled to come online, I think in 2025, 2026, but I think that there is quite a bit to do. I think that there has been talk at the ISO that this project will likely more be a 2028 project. The other things that are happening is that they are right now currently studying a line from Chatham SS down to Leamington TS. Right now, they are in the phase of drafting up an environmental proposal. This line is supposed to come online by 2024, 2025. But I think from our perspective, it is still pretty early, since they are only doing the draft environmental studies. They still have to procure the land, they still have to get the permitting, and then we have to think about construction. The third thing that's happening right now is that they're also building a new TS, the Lakeshore TS. So that's going to be north of the Leamington TS. So there is quite a bit of going on to try to alleviate the situation. But even with all these fixes, there is still going to be a long-term capacity need. And I think that even for some of these timelines, they are very variable, because when you're building large transmission, there is a lot of permitting and a lot of stakeholding that needs to be done. But I think in terms of the area, so our project right now will be close to the Leamington TS. And right now, I think for us, we are hoping to alleviate some of the power constraints. I think by 2025 or 2026, we are expecting about 1,100 megawatts of new load to come on in the Leamington area. And in the shorter term, as early as next year, there is still about 400 megawatts that are looking to connect to the region, but there is not enough capacity right now. So our project is expected to NTP by 2023 and hopefully online by 2024. So as you can see, I think our project is well underway right now. We are currently working on procurement. So I think that for our project would be able to be very beneficial to the Windsor-Essex region in the short term. So this is just a more detailed graph. So it just shows you the new switching station that is being constructed at the Leamington TS. So I think we can move past from this one, Alex.
I can jump in, Tai, give a quick overview of the project itself. We're looking at a 350 megawatt system, 4 hours, so 1.4 gigawatt hours of capacity. The system would plan to be a lithium iron phosphate. The site that we've selected is kind of just north of the real agricultural infrastructure in Leamington. It's actually located in Lakeshore, just south of sort of the transmission line running east-west, and south of the what they call the Leamington switching station that's fairly new, that's been built in that area. It does tap off the 230 kV line. And we plan on connecting to both lines so that we have as much charging and generating capacity as possible, and can provide during contingency events if possible. Yeah, you can see a small snapshot of the layout there. We plan on situating the project on about 30 acres of land. And it'd be about somewhere between 500 and 600 modular containers. They're the kind of 8-foot shipping 8 by 40 foot shipping containers. Just in terms of timeline, we are still working our way through site control, but we're in the final stages now. So we are a little bit delayed here as we are in Q4 of 2021 right now. We've started working with the consultant to kind of prep our permitting procedure. Stantec has given us a bit of a preliminary assessment. They don't see any major impacts on the project. We've grouped the timing of this into 3 different sections. Phase 1 would be just a baseline environmental studies, including natural environment, cultural heritage, and archaeology. And we're just getting underway with that now. Stage 2 would be a more in-depth a full noise assessment of the impacts of the facility, which we don't expect there to be any. And then issuing a environmental assessment screening report with the MECP. Phase 3 would be site plan approval through the Township of Lakeshore. And we have begun discussions with them and currently have a pre-consultation meeting set up with their group. In between phases 1 and 2 of the permitting would be a more thorough design of the facility so that we can really reference that when we're doing some of the more detailed permitting. We're active in stakeholder engagement, and we've been very active in discussing this project with IESO. So that's underway and will continue to be underway. And we've started our interconnection study. So the first phase of this interconnection process is study with the IESO, where we've gotten a little bit of feedback so far, and they're progressing. That's expected to end in Q3 2022, at which point the study moves from a system impact study to a facility design study with Hydro One, so that you get more detailed on the actual physical connection that would be planned. So that development period with interconnection and with stakeholdering and project finance, we expect to bring us right into the kind of midway 2023, where we might be able to hit our milestone of NTP. And move into a construction phase. Construction phase is expected to last somewhere between 6 months to a year. And we put operations falling somewhere in line of mid 2024. You're on mute, Tai.
Here we go. Sorry, Alex, I can't see the slides.
We're on the net ratepayer savings. Just everyone else see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Yes,
No problem, Alex.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm having problems there, but I've got another slide.
We're on slide 15 here, so we can kind of follow along through that.
Okay, so look, I think for us, when we're looking at this project, we're looking at it from a technical perspective, but also an economical perspective, not only for ourselves, but for Ontario ratepayers. So I think for us, besides, engaging technical consultants to study the Ontario system as well as the local Leamington system, but also hiring economic advisors in terms of how does this benefit the whole system in terms of ratepayer savings. So with this system intact or in operations, we are expecting to save ratepayers about $623 million if we were to operate this project for 20 years. A battery storage plant you can operate almost to perpetuity, but it depends on an augmentation schedule or upgrading the plant as you go. A large energy storage plant is just multiple cells. As the cells degrade, you can replace them. So our base case right now is to operate for 20 years, but after 20 years, depending on market conditions, we could operate for another 20 years. And if we were to do that, we would save Ontario ratepayers about $2.4 billion. So the savings, where is it coming from? So basically what the system is doing is it's taking power when power is cheap and then offloading that power when the power is expensive. So by us offloading the power, by taking the power when it's cheap and offloading it during peak times, we are actually reducing the HOEP or the market price. So this is largely where these savings are coming from. Next slide.
We're on 16 now.
Okay. Is this the why the asset slide? Because I can't see it on
APO base case summary.
APO base case summary.
Yeah, I think Tai was kind of already talking to this. We can jump to the next one, Alex.
I think the only additional point to flag here as well is CO2 emissions reductions is fairly substantial as well. We're looking at an average of 625,000 per year. And that's, I think, a very material point of interest for a sector that's very focused on ESG considerations, and we hope to contribute to that.
So why this asset? I think for us, this asset, we feel this asset is very attractive for Ontario and for the Leamington area because it can be built very quickly. So we've been developing this for quite a while now. We are quite confident that we can hit COD in 2024. So it will be able to provide benefit to Ontario and to the Leamington area in the shorter term. Two, there's definitely ratepayer savings. We've done a pretty rigorous analysis with our external consultants to make sure that not only does it solve technical problems, but it also saves ratepayers money. And thirdly, definitely provides a system benefit. As we were talking earlier, Ontario is going to be short capacity very shortly. If not already short already, and this can be on quite quickly to be able to increase the amount of capacity on the system. As well, it also provides the ancillary services. And lastly, it's a pretty low profile project. The project can be built, is planned to be built on a 30-acre site, which is a fairly small footprint for a large project. So in terms of project status, we have been working quite diligently over the past several months. I think right now we are in very late stages of land acquisition, just closing off that negotiation. Mike has started the permitting as well as hiring, third-party consultants to help us with that. We've already started the SIA and the CIA process with Hydro One and the IESO through our discussions with the IESO. They are looking at this project pretty favorably. We are having another meeting with them next week. So this will be probably the third or fourth meeting that we've had with them. So there is definitely interest to move this forward. In terms of EPC, we've already started the procurement process. Right now, we need to start this pretty early because the battery market is very busy right now. So for us, in order for us to procure equipment for our 2023 build, we need to start now. And then we have a pretty quick operations period. We can start operating this plant by hopefully mid-2024. Do you want to go through this slide, Alex?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tai. So really here, this is the information we're able to provide you at this point. We're certainly looking forward to the opportunity to keep you appraised as we go through these stages. But now we're hoping that you can kind of speak to where your sector is facing energy constraints and any thought you've given towards the kind of solutions you want to see for the area. Your priorities when the ISO is talking about system solutions, the difference between transmission, local generation, and community energy. What thoughts have you given into where your organization has a preference? And specifically, what are your views on BSS systems? Is this something you have familiarity with? Is this something you're comfortable with? Or is this something that you feel that we have a challenge to make sure that we continue engaging with stakeholders and informing them? And lastly, would really appreciate any feedback you can provide on the information that you're looking for from us over the coming 2 or so years of development. And we certainly hope to maintain that relationship if we are successful and have this project come online. We want to make sure that we have an open door, that you guys know that we are accessible and available for any questions as to how this project could affect your operations. Aaron, I recall, from our last meeting with the Leamington Chamber of Commerce, you had spoken to, some of the local kind of energy solutions that your members were adopting already, and how this project might intersect with that and support that. Is there anything else you can kind of talk to us about, any thoughts you've had since that meeting, or anything else you'd like to follow up on?
Yeah, I guess I would be curious to know if you guys thought about what rate you would sell the electricity at. From pulling off grid, you would conceivably be getting it at a much lower rate. So if you're selling it back on peak, eliminating the strain on the grid, what is the incentive in terms of cost savings? And secondary to that, I would also be very interested to know if they would save money from a delivery charge standpoint also. So really the economics in what you're offering, I think would be very, very interesting to see the business case. And then further to that, what the plan is. I know you spoke about working with Hydro One, but would you fully be utilizing their assets to deliver this energy, or would there be further requirements? So I'm thinking more infrastructure necessary, which would require more ECAs and those types of things that could extend a timeline for this to occur. So if you could talk sort of on those points, I'd be interested.
Sure. So maybe I can take the first question. Maybe Mike, you can help with the second question. So in terms of the economics of the project, I think for us, in terms of the price at which we sell the power, I think for us, that's going to be based purely on market basis. So basically what we're doing is we're taking energy at night, buying it at the market price, and then selling it to the grid at market prices during peak times. So that's going to be purely market based. So I think other forms of revenue are in terms of just ancillary services, so operating reserve and frequency regulation. Right now, that there is no market for frequency regulation in terms of operating reserves. There is a market there. We do plan to participate in that. I think in terms of frequency regulation, I think it's going to depend on the IES. So right now, our system is 350 megawatts, and we're going to use that purely for capacity and operating reserve purposes. But if the ISO requires us to use it for frequency regulation, we will need to figure out an arrangement with them. So I think, but our revenue is based on two sources. One is both, the market-based sources, which is the operating reserves, as well as selling the energy, or what we call energy arbitrage. But the third portion is providing capacity to the system. And the capacity historically in Ontario, it's been contracted out by the government. In the future, there will be capacity markets, or we are planning for there to be capacity markets. But until that happens, I think for us, in order for this to be economical for us, we need to come up with an arrangement with the IESO for a contract for the capacity. I think it will be historically, on the Ontario power system, a lot of the projects have been getting, longer term contracts. I think the government is veering away from that. So we are talking to the ISO about a shorter term contract there.
Yeah.
So
and further to that too, I guess from a policy standpoint with the ISO, right now until month's end, there's the applications for the grid, the sandbox modernization. So whether it's theirs or other in getting energy into the grid, and opportunities there to rewrite policy, as well as some of the other grid modernization. And as you have here in the slide, sort of green and emission reductions intakes ongoing. So would those be what you would be looking to pursue with ISO in terms of funding for this, or just from a policy standpoint, rewriting how maybe some of the legislation is wrote currently?
If I could kind of take a stab at this one first, I think for the Grid Innovation Fund is really slightly a smaller bucket and around the $10 million range. A lot of that is really going to be earmarked for more experimental projects on a smaller scale that haven't been proven or are at the edge of innovation. This is a project that is very confidently applied in their jurisdictions. It's certainly at a larger scale, but there's no real question marks here as to whether or not it's feasible or can demonstrate value. These have come online and we know that it's going to work. insofar as there are opportunities for funding. The federal government with some of their the Canada Infrastructure Bank and NRCan have larger envelopes that BW Solar is exploring. In terms of regulations, it's the Innovation Sandbox, again, is kind of a smaller vehicle, and we don't really need anything in terms of what they're offering vis-a-vis, compensating DRs or smaller innovative resources. Most of the regulatory treatments already exist. It's really so much as the gated assessment process will be an opportunity to determine, what the technical value can be delivered by this project and how to best structure a contract to maximize the interests of the ratepayers in the operations of this asset. So those are certainly opportunities we've looked at, and the ISO has looked at what we need to come online. And I don't think we really need to go into they don't believe that we need to go into a major regulatory reform effort to make this work.
Now, would you be open to compounding this effort maybe with another renewable source? So if you're not if the idea was to pull energy at a reduced rate off peak, what about pairing up with other renewables such as the wind farms here to top up the batteries? Is that something you've thought about?
Yeah, I could take that question, and I think essentially that's what we are and would be doing here. Wind is one of those. It's not really a surplus base load source, but it is a surplus source, that in the fact that it's often peaking during the night and providing power when Ontario doesn't necessarily need it. And so our battery would be, drawing from the grid, yes, but obviously where it's located, it would be drawing from majority of wind sources, and then shifting that power to a time of use. Given Ontario's kind of current outlook on renewables and permitting scheme, we're definitely not looking at installing more wind in the region. Although I would say, solar might be a source of generation that makes sense and might be something that we explore in the future, but not for this particular project.
And then, with the whole idea of renewable in mind, what is the life expectancy of one battery? And then what is the recycling process for said battery after its time is up?
Yeah, good questions. The useful life is something that's probably really dependent on use case. So both how often are you cycling it, and as well as how deep are you cycling. So are you completely draining it and completely filling it? Those severely impact the degradation. Generally, these facilities are installed with like an augmentation schedule in mind, in that, and just useful life of this particular facility is probably about 20 years. And it would be installed, slightly over capacity to start its life. And then, there'd be years set in a schedule to update some of the cells, either adding more or replacing cells. And that would, probably something like years, 5, 10, and 15 or something, doing a slight rework of the configuration to make sure that we kept that capacity at 100%. And that would be our model. I think Tai alluded to the fact that, these facilities, the life can certainly be extended well beyond then. The core infrastructure like transformers, substations, inverters can last a lot longer, and obviously the cabling. And so it's just a matter of, is the technology, does it continue to make sense, beyond that time, and perhaps augmenting or doing a major kind of DC rebuild 20 years down the line to see the facility life extend. As far as recycling, there are a number of recyclers out there. I'm definitely aware of one in the US that claims to fully recycle batteries, and that they disassemble and make future use of all the elements contained. But I think that's an industry that is definitely still growing. I think currently a lot of lithium iron phosphate is kind of shipped back overseas and dismantled, and portions are reused, but it's definitely a growing, I mean, not just in the energy space, but when you look at electric vehicles and all the electronics we have, battery recycling is a really growing space.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that information. I do think it would be very interesting to see as you've acknowledged and everyone on the call understands, that the cost of carbon moving forward is really going to have an impact on agricultural operations and costs. So I think when we discuss economics at this point, there's two economics that are really important. One is the financial economics, and the other is the carbon economics, right? So definitely the case to see, we're trading out of one fuel source for electrical storage. And although we are minimizing our carbon footprint in one area, are we in fact maintaining the same footprint, even though it's not really realized until 20 years down the road?
Yeah, understood.
So that's just my feedback there. So I will mute myself and let anyone else who would have some questions feel free.
Aaron, I'll just address maybe your other question. I think you did have an infrastructure question as well, and maybe deliverability. In terms of the interconnection of the project, there are 230 lines running across the site that we've chosen to develop the project on. And so the infrastructure that Hydro One or us would need, it would be fully funded as part of our project. And it would be as simple as a tap with some protection elements. We are tapping on both lines, so protection would be a little bit more complex, and a couple of substations. But again, that's all within our project scope. Hydro One would likely need some communications with our site as well, and there was preliminary discussions about that coming from the Leamington switching station that was just built. But any additional infrastructure on the communication side that was needed would also fall within the scope of our project and fees from our project. As far as deliverability, I mean, it doesn't really affect deliverability, because the energy that's generated is still needs to be delivered on Hydro One's network to our battery. And it's, our battery is just a kind of intermittent source just to store it for the time being, and then deliver it when it's needed. But obviously we still do need the Hydro One network to deliver power to our location, so it can be delivered from there. Hope that helps answer. Yeah.
Mike or Tai, perhaps one of you could speak to, what the community could expect to see and experience during the construction process. What kind of scale of construction or trucking and labor, to quantify kind of the disruption compared to other energy storage other energy resources that are alternatives to a BESS.
Yeah. Construction. I mean, low profile is a good terminology, I guess. It's not a tall facility. There is going to be probably increased truck traffic in terms of just delivering the batteries. Mentioned at least preliminary look that there'd probably be somewhere between 500 and 600 physical containers that would be delivered and would store batteries. So that's a great deal of trucking, probably span the course of 3 or 4 months to deliver all those. There'd be a crane on site to set them, but these aren't very tall cranes. It'd be a temporary crane, not something that you need to set up on site. I think that's
And then once it's in operation,
processes.
it's really quite minimal, I think, compared to really anything else, much less a wind turbine or just quite little noise or
it's
activity.
Almost exactly like a solar facility in that there's, they're not manned. There's very little maintenance. It is highly visual from like communication schemes. So we would have access, and operators would have access to the facility digitally to see how it's performing, check heat and safety, and operate it remotely. So it's a quiet neighbor that does not have much foot traffic at all.
What would you say is the exposure from a risk standpoint if there was a power surge or they got hit by lightning? Because obviously from a weather standpoint, it's pretty active in this region. What are there redundancies built in place? Would the de facto backup be drawing from the grid from regular practice, or what's the contingency plan?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. You mean if like for lightning strikes, I think we just rely on standard protection devices at the high voltage level to be able to dissipate that power. There should be lightning protection around the entire facility, so it shouldn't affect our operation. If lightning was to take out a substation or a line or something, or just weather in general, depending on where that hits in the system, and like I said, we're still kind of going through that study process. We may need to have it, we may need to shut down temporarily during those events, but I would say for the most part, it's really not going to have an impact.
Yeah, no, I should have maybe been less specific. I was just curious if there was a surge or something, if there's a scenario where the batteries would shut themselves off and not be able to provide accessible electricity.
Most of the surge protection would be at the high voltage level and would be taken care of there, and that the batteries themselves wouldn't even see it. But there is lower voltage surge protection at the inverter side of the system as well. So that's like the DC side that connects the batteries, but those would not have. You wouldn't see the weather impact there like you would on the high voltage system.
So if I may ask a question, kind of piggybacking on something that you mentioned earlier. So your plan is to tie into the grid and get the market rate and really provide a backup and provide excess capacity to the area. But sort of in the longer term, could this be set up in a way, just given your geographic location and the fact that you can see quite plainly that there's a lot of expansion to greenhouse agriculture out there, could this be something that individual growers could invest in acquiring capacity direct from the storage at a lower cost, almost on a fee-for-service basis? Is that something that has been explored, or is this just tying straight into the grid?
This system's just tying straight into the grid. I think that idea of service individual customers is sort of where the energy space is probably heading with microgrids and that sort of thing, but really difficult to actually put into practice with current infrastructure. Could I see it happening somewhere down the road? Yeah, possibly, but I don't think it's not envisioned for the project right now.
Okay, so then asked another way,
sure.
If a microgrid developed in that area, is that something that you guys would be looking at being players as part of, if one actually just developed in that area?
I don't see why not.
All right, thanks.
I think the near-term challenge is the ISO is a monopsony, and the only ones that could procure it doesn't allow any kind of arrangements that you're envisioning. From a technical perspective, I don't see any reason why BW would be opposed to that. I mean, they're certainly happy to make themselves available for local system needs, and if that could be done on a bilateral basis, I would speculate that if the law allows it and the ISO allows it, I think makes a lot of commercial sense for everyone to participate in that.
Yeah, so like I think like we've been talking about net metering in Ontario for a long time. I think that a lot of this is driven by the IESO. The IESO is the only one that can sell power right now. So I think for us, from a technical perspective, it's something that's possible, but regulation has to catch up. Because as you can see in the renewable markets all around the world, particularly in the US, a lot of them are selling directly to corporates or directly to the customers. So I think that's bound to happen here. We're just not sure when that will happen.
So if there are no more questions, I mean, if there are questions, we'd certainly be happy to take that up offline and follow up with you really on any material. We do want to engage and get in the weeds with you and make sure that there's comfort and awareness for what this project is about and what it can do. You know, over the next couple of weeks and months, we're going to continue engaging with the government and the ISO to move this forward. And we know that they're looking very actively at Southwestern Ontario's agricultural energy needs. I know OGVG is very strongly engaged on that file and are a voice at the table. I see representation from OMAFRA here as well. You know, this is not the only solution that's going to be there in the Southwest. We're going to need a lot more resources beyond BW to meet your needs. Especially, you know, we have a track record of sometimes under predicting what demand growth might be. Electrification takes off at the pace or faster than we're expecting. We're going to need a lot more battery storage. We're going to need a lot more generation in the area. We're hoping to count on your voice to push the importance and the priority and the urgency of these system needs to government and to the ISO. We want to be an ally and a partner in that. So any support you can provide for us in your discourse and any support that we can provide for you, we certainly see a lot of synergy and opportunities to work together and make sure we can keep Southwestern Ontario's economy humming the way it has been for the past decade.
Yeah, so thank you. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add to that. I was just thinking that, you know, in terms of this project, I think for us, we want to be a part of the solution with the IESO and Hydro One. They are coming up with a bunch of different transmission options to help relieve the constraint in the area. But I think for us, and for the IESO and for Hydro One, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of just permitting, land acquisition, stakeholder engagement. So I think that the timing, we know that there's going to be a short-term need, and some of these projects are passing. It's going to pass that time frame in terms of being operational. So it's going to be several years behind where the actual need is. So I think for our project, we're hoping to complement that. We do hope that, you know, all the transmission solutions come into place on time. But if they don't, our project is there. And I think, as I said earlier on, even with all of these transmission upgrades, there's still forecasted to be a need.
Yeah, so thanks again, you guys, for being here today with us and taking the time out to go a bit into detail on this. As they mentioned, if anyone has any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And with that said, everyone have a good rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.